can help us achieve a carbon neutral economy, and which sectors would be key in this endeavor? Thank you.
Certainly. Thanks, Karsten, and good morning, everyone. It's great to see you joining us in such numbers today and to see the great level of interest in the topic. I have prepared a few slides for you, which I will try sharing. Sarah, if you could take down your slide deck. Okay, right. Here you go. Can you see my screen? Yeah, okay, perfect. Hi. So first of all, I'm a communications manager at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. I cover climate, food, and biodiversity. And I'll walk you through the first half of our policy paper, leaving our co-author Mats to walk you through the second half. So in the paper, we actually looked at the opportunities that a circular economy can contribute to helping the EU achieve its climate targets. We focused, as Karsten mentioned, primarily on three main sectors, and those were food, the built environment, and urban mobility. And here we looked particularly at passenger vehicles. But first, just to make sure we're all on the same page, what we understand through a circular economy is in stark contrast with the current economic model, which is wasteful. It's an economy that designs out waste and pollution from the outset, an economy that keeps products and materials in use, and one that regenerates natural systems. And a lot of the evidence base that we used for this policy paper came from a 2019 study that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation completed in collaboration with Material Economics, which is a consulting company from Sweden. And in it, we looked basically at the potential for the circular economy to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. The main findings from the paper was that by optimizing the uptake of renewable energy, by electrifying transport, and by switching to energy efficiency, we could mitigate as much as 55% of the man-made greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. The remaining 45% of emissions, however, stem from how we make and how we consume products and food, and those cannot be easily tackled through the energy transition. The circular economy plays a key role in tackling those 45%. You might be wondering where the 45% come from. We looked primarily at the emissions. We're talking primarily about the emissions coming from industry, as well as agriculture, forestry, and land use. And the reasons why these cannot be tackled easily through the energy transition vary. Basically, they have to do with how these emissions come to be in the first place. So for instance, in industry, we have chemical processes that release greenhouse gases. For example, the making of cement requires breaking down limestone into calcium oxide and carbon dioxide. So you've got a source of emissions there that simply cannot be tackled through the energy transition. We're also talking about high heat temperatures that are required in the making of products like steel and cement. We're talking about the emissions resulting from the end of life of technical and biological materials, as well as looking at agriculture, forestry, and land use. We're talking about changes in land use, which release carbon from the soil. We're talking about methane associated with livestock rearing, nitrous oxides, and so on and so forth. So that's what the 45% of emissions we're talking about, that's what they represent. Now, going back to what the circular economy does, what its core principles are, the way in which it can reduce greenhouse gases is that by designing out waste and pollution, it addresses end-of-life greenhouse gases, as well as the emissions associated with structural losses in our economy. And here we're primarily referring to things like the materials that go into parking lots, which then sit empty, and the emissions that are required to make those materials. By keeping products and materials in use, the circular economy reduces the material demand and therefore the requirements, the emissions associated with material requirements. And by regenerating natural systems, it helps sequester carbon in soils and in plants. As we mentioned in the beginning, we chose 3 economic sectors that are a massive source of greenhouse gas emissions in the EU, and those are the built environment, food, and urban mobility. For each of the sector, we identified the key circular economy opportunities, and then for each opportunity, we then looked at what are policies that can help the EU size this opportunity. We don't have time to go through all of them today, but just to give you a few examples. So for the built environment, we looked at things like designing buildings for circularity from the outset. And some policy interventions that we recommended in the paper were changing the building codes to embed requirements for the reusability of building components, using prefabricated components to enable modular design, and also to reduce waste because prefabricated components have lower waste associated in the production phase, and using materials with lower embodied emissions where that's appropriate. So one example here being timber. Other opportunities we identified were increasing building utilization, so the extent to which floor space is used, promoting digital technologies like BIM and material registries, promoting deconstruction over demolition, and promoting the developments of secondary raw material market. And the climate benefits from maximizing all of these opportunities would be reducing the emissions associated with 4 key construction materials: cement, aluminum, steel, and plastics by 56% by 2050. Another sector we looked at was urban mobility, and for reasons of space, but also importance, we actually zoomed into passenger vehicles. And here the opportunities we identified, and we acknowledge the fact that the EU is already doing a lot in this sector. We've also just seen the smart mobility strategy come out at the end of last year. So there's already a lot being done there. A few things that we added was promoting repair, refurbishment, and recycling of vehicles and spare parts. And the conducive policies that we recommended was following, for example, the Swedish model, lowering the VAT on repair. So including activities like repair and remanufacturing in the Annex 3 of the VAT directive. And for this sector, but also for other sectors, we recommended more broadly taxing virgin material use rather than labor to promote a repair economy. A couple of other opportunities we identified were enabling a multimodal transport system and fostering circular design for new vehicles. And the climate benefits of all of these opportunities, if optimized, would be reducing the emissions in embedded materials by 70% by 2050. And lastly, for the food system, the 3 key opportunities we identified were promoting regenerative farming practices. And here, evidently, there's a suite of policies, but we identified the subsidy program, so reforming the CAP, and specifically the eco schemes that each member state will have in place as a key opportunity to promote regenerative farming and thus reduce emissions. And fostering digital farming using things like the European Innovation Platform and its agricultural knowledge and innovation systems. 2 other opportunities to mention are preventing food waste and loss, and circulating unavoidable food and bio-waste. The climate benefits of maximizing these opportunities we estimated would be to up to 49% of the emissions from the food system being reduced by 2050. And that's it for me. Thank you, Karsten.
Thank you, Carmen. These were only a few illustrative examples of the type of synergies that we can create by exploiting circular economy potential for decarbonization in these sectors. We will certainly build on these later on in our discussion, how EU policies could best address these potentials. Let me turn now to you, Mats, so that you can set a bit the policy context for us and introduce us to some of the horizontal policy recommendations of the paper. We would be particularly interested in hearing your views on the role that the updated European industrial strategy and potentially also the European climate law can play here. Thank you, Mats.
Thank you very much, Karsten, and thank you, Carmen, for introducing your important part of this report. So we have also looked at 5 horizontal policy areas and how they can promote low carbon circular industry. The first one is the industrial policy. The second one is climate policy more in general. We also looked at the recovery plans and Next Generation EU, the future of the European semester process, and then finally the external aspects of these transitions. So starting with the industrial policy part, now the Commission is updating the industrial strategy. We think one important point is to clearly establish a resource efficiency first principle in the strategy, as has been done in energy policy when it comes to the energy efficiency first principle. And this would be wider. It would mean first to consider resource efficiency, circular economy aspects before making, for example, investments in changed production methods, which are also needed in a number of cases, but first to look at the resource efficiency possibilities. And to make this happen, it's also important to have the mental shift by stating it, but also to provide the tools as it's currently being done with looking at obstacles and opportunities on the energy efficiency first principle. To do a similar exercise on the resource efficiency first principle is another important part of this. Then it's important to look at the possibilities for large-scale demonstration of circular economy solutions that can also lower carbon emissions. We can see with the EU Innovation Fund now that most applications for the large-scale projects are on the production side. And here one has to look both on better ways on creating platforms across the value chain, and perhaps also on the legal language on the Innovation Fund now when the emission trading system regulation is being revised. And the Horizon Europe efforts are good, but they don't go far enough when it comes to this commercialization phase, we think. And this is also linked to the state aid and competition frameworks, allowing more state subsidies for innovative solutions and also more cooperation along value chains. We have the Industrial Emissions Directive, which is being revised, another important part. And finally, on this topic, now when industrial policy is going more to an ecosystem approach, that can be very good. The Battery Alliance is a good example, for example, but it's also very important to keep the transversal aspects across sectors and also in the governance of this new ecosystem approach. Then on climate policies, of course, the ambition level in the climate law that Jytte Guteland is now negotiating will be very important. Also, the ways the Commission will follow this up with proposals. We know from earlier that the national energy and climate plans that member states submit do not take circular economy well enough into account. So here we propose a toolbox with good examples how this can be done, that should be developed. Carmen highlighted a number of sector-specific actions that also need to be integrated in these climate packages. And it's also important to go on with the carbon footprint methodologies, not only on the products, but also on more system-wide carbon footprint methods. On the national recovery plans, there is good language in the Commission guidelines on taking account of circular economy, but this really also has to be prioritized in the dialogue with the member states now on the national plans. And one example where a lot can be done and where this is a really great moment because of the amount of money is to make sure there is good synergies between digitalization and these green transitions. There's a lot to be done there. One can find good examples in some member states, but there's also much more to be done to really make member states think about this in their national plans. The framework for public procurement is another area where now a lot of money will be spent. And finally, on this topic, the role of SMEs is important, as well as the final design of the EU taxonomy that has also been a lot of controversy around, but it's really important that the circular economy parts of the taxonomy are applied well. So going on to the European semester process, this is now linked a lot to the recovery plans, but there's also discussion about the future of the European semester. And in addition to the concrete recommendations there, now one aspect is to encourage green tax reforms, also for the stage of fiscal consolidation that will probably come in a year or number of years' time. And this is also important to create markets for the industries that are based on circular economy, resource efficiency. This can also be encouraged, as Carmen said, by changes to the VAT directive. And also the skills agenda is very important that member states also use in their work to increase the competence also related to the role of workers in the future, that they can develop their skills in the just transition. Finally, the external aspects of industrial policy is also an important part. IEEP has written other reports on circular economy and trade policy. It's encouraging that foreign ministers are now prioritizing climate diplomacy, but there has to be much more priority to the circular economy aspects of this. It's good with the new alliance that has been created, but this also has to be a priority of the External Action Service. The carbon border adjustment mechanism have to be analyzed also from a circular economy perspectives. IEEP has written about this as well. And finally, also since there might be tensions around the CBAMs, also to promote cooperation with other parts of the world on the early stages of innovation and on standards, and also not letting the global south down when it comes to intellectual property rights, for example, for these new innovative solutions. I'll stop there, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mats. And I acknowledge it's limited time to go into the details, but we hope we can pick up on some of the points that you raised after we heard the initial reactions from the European Commission and the members of the European Parliament. Let us break first for probably only due to time to two questions that already popped up amongst many other interesting ones in the Q&A from our audience. So maybe I start with you, Mats. Harish Kati Nataran, I hope pronunciation was not too bad, raised the question, how relevant is the role of the digital transformation in increasing circularity of products, also given that at the same time we are discussing a strategy for a digital Europe at EU level. And maybe Carmen can complement that from her sector perspective as well. And then I give you at the same time the second question to think about. That's from Peter Gringinger, who said, he referred to all the percentages he heard and thought, is that really enough? So the percentage that circular economy can contribute to the reduction to greenhouse gas emissions, is that alone really enough to reaching carbon neutrality as soon as possible? And do we not also need to look at the energy transformation from a circular economy point of view and not only at the other sectors? Maybe Matt starts and then Carmen complements.
I think it's a really good question about the digital Europe, and there is a need for more coherence between the digital transition and the green transition, I think. And just to take an example, maybe somebody here is more of an expert on that than me, but there is a very exciting development on digitalization in what is called waste management. And you can imagine large-scale demonstration of this through cities, through companies, through using digital methods, even machine learning. And this is an area where, when I was talking about large-scale demonstration, where I think one of many where there can be much more done to merge these two twin transitions.
Carmen, anything to complement from your side?
Sure. We also see digitalization being very important in agriculture and food, and it's something we touched upon in the paper as well, where the transition to regenerative farming practices needs to be underpinned by a greater knowledge transmission and involving farmers through the European Innovation Platform, basically to promote digital farming, which has been proven to help with certain regenerative agricultural practices. And regarding the question about the energy transition, so our contention is by no means that the circular economy needs to be addressed in isolation, rather that it needs to go hand in hand with the energy transition. But the focus so far has been almost exclusively on the energy transition. So, and we're saying, well, actually, there's another part to the climate story. It's materials, it's production and consumption, and that needs to be taken into account.
Thank you, Carmen. I hope that helps a bit clarifying the focus of our study. I see that also from Igor Struve, there are a couple of questions related. Why do we focus exclusively on these three sectors? And that's just for me as a moderator and also co-author to say we use that as illustrative examples that you need both the horizontal policy framework and the sector-specific ones. And we zoomed into some examples of what is usually considered to be hard to abate sectors, but obviously there are many other relevant industrial sectors. And maybe if we now switch on or hear from the European Commission, how these findings of our paper resonate with the broader considerations for the update of the European industrial strategy, we can pick up on some of these questions as well. So I'm very happy to welcome Antti Valle, who is Deputy Head of the Energy Intensive Industries and Raw Materials Unit at the Directorate General for the Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs. Mr. Valle, good morning and thank you for joining us. I have as a starting question to introduce your initial remarks. The notion that the European industrial strategy was published by the Commission only in March 2020. And at that time, we had a reference to the new EU Circular Economy Action Plan. So the link has been made. But in the meantime, I mean, we all know the EU had to agree on the biggest economic recovery program in its history and decided at the same time that it needs to significantly ramp up its climate ambitions for 2030. So it would be great if you could share a bit the thinking how these developments will reshape the future industrial strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Karsten. And first of all, congratulations for the very clear and sound report you have produced. I think it's really useful and contributes to this debate. Unfortunately, I missed the first quarter of your presentations due to connection issues. I would like to blame the Commission systems for that, but I think it has to do with my IT skills. Still, after 1 year in teleworking, these issues occur, unfortunately. So first of all, just to remind that the adoption of this industrial strategy update has been postponed till the 27th of April. So there are 6 more weeks to work on it. I can say that the work that conducted by us as officials has been more or less completed. It's now with the political leadership to consider. I'm not a pen holder at this stage anymore. It's a very small group of people finalizing this effort. So not able to really anticipate what will be the final outcome. But let's say, just to put this into the context, a year ago, the Commission published the industrial strategy that is already well on track. And this update is not meant to repeat the elements which are on track. So the idea is really to reflect the changes and reinforcement needed due to the COVID crisis that has reminded us about many vulnerabilities regarding supply chains and the need to strengthen, let's say, the strategic capacities of the EU industry, and of course the more ambitious 2030 climate targets, which impose lots of requirements for the industry to move faster. So these are the two two main drivers behind this update, and of course the key elements also like in the strategy a year ago, they still relate with the function of the single market and the twin transition of our digital and green. And at this event, we are focusing, of course, on the industry's green transition, which calls for both supply and demand side measures. Supply meaning, for example, acceleration of investments in resource efficiency, waste recovery, and renewables. And on demand side, maybe I would like to mention the work on the sustainable product initiative, which transfers the focus from final products to the whole value chain approach. So I believe these issues will be addressed in this update. But overall, the key issue is that the sustainable business case is not strong enough to enable this transition for the industry. So robust policy action are needed. But it's very difficult to dive more deeper now at this stage into the concrete possible potential actions that the political leadership will put forward. But certainly your paper is very timely and contributes to this debate. Good timing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Valli, for providing this rather overarching picture on industrial strategy and putting our paper into the context. I hope obviously we are not speculating what will be finally in there, but as our paper outlined, both sector-specific challenges and policy options as well horizontal ones, there may be a few questions coming back how that could be reflected in the strategy and the following implementation, also through the things which are already be in place, like the industrial ecosystem approach that the Commission is following. Now I'm very pleased to welcome two important members of the European Parliament. First of all, Jytte Guteland from the group of the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats. Welcome. And we also have Sirpa Pietikainen from the group of the European People's Party. Thank you both for joining our breakfast discussion. Ms. Guteland, you are the rapporteur for the European climate law. Therefore, we obviously would be keen to hear from you about your expectations, how the new European industrial strategy should match the ambition that you envision for the climate law and maybe the European Green Deal in more general terms. And how do you see the strategic dimension that we try to highlight through our paper to look at these objectives from a circular economy approach or perspective? Thank you.
Thank you, Karsten, and thank you for everyone for letting me be here. I think it's very interesting and timely to join this webinar. And I must say, looking at the report, I would say that it has all the important aspects for the circular economy, both making sure that we in the industrial strategy have the circular economy as the new engine, and also when we look at how we are going to finance this transition and make sure that we are going in a green direction. I believe we also need the circular economy in our mind in every aspect, in the EU budget, in the also post-COVID transition for the economy, to the Rescue EU, and also, of course, in all our international relations, in the trade, in the climate diplomacy. We need to be having the circular economy as our tool. And I would like to talk about the climate law, of course, and how I see that. But I can start by saying, if I see the climate law as as the vision and the road that we are going. This is a historic transition. We are going from coal and steel union to climate neutral union. This is setting a completely new direction for Europe. So this is the big picture and our common vision, and that's for everything. This is what we are doing in this era of time. Then the circular economy is for me the wheel we use, the way, the tool, how to make sure that we can steer Europe in a new direction. And of course, it has to be mainstreamed into all relevant legislation, and it needs to be mainstreamed into all different parts of the European Union's work, and therefore make sure that we are building this new sustainable Europe together, and that we take the resources that we have and use them properly. The way we use our raw material today, it's not sustainable, and we also know that if we are continuing like this for Europe, we need 3 planets. So we are really in desperate need to change, and therefore thank you so much for this report and how to do it. I would like to say that for me, who's in the middle of the trialogue with the climate law, in my head at this moment, I have very much all the time the focus of making sure that Europe is working faster to reduce emissions. And my main goal is to make sure that we do everything from the Parliament's side to go faster and make sure that the European Union is better linked with the Paris Agreement, and also with the scientific report from IPCC and others that show that we at this moment are going too slow. And more concretely, I would say that of course that means that the 2030 target needs to be revised, and we need on this pathway to the climate neutral EU, 2030 is really important. And I don't see at this moment that the other European Union institutions are doing enough. And I'm very clear about that, also outspoken about it, because I believe they also need to reflect about how close they actually are to going where science is saying one should be. But also, if you look at the 55 target and the idea that at least 55 should be the target, then if you really look at what's on the table from these other institutions, the Council, the Commission, they are not doing that, because they have a net target, and that actually could create a loophole to the reduction that we need to see. So this is very much the focus when it comes to the 2030 target. But then, of course, we also need to make sure that we have a better way of integrating what we are doing in the society and also in the sectors, so that we know how much we emit. And we do that. Of course, we have big calculation, we have the impact assessment, but we also have lots of calculation that the European Commission is using. But we need a better way of seeing the whole picture. And therefore, I think we should have a greenhouse gas budget to be able to see better where we are, how we are fulfilling the Paris Agreement, and also to help us set target. And that should also, of course, be important for the trajectory to 2050, and for the 2040 target. I think a greenhouse gas budget also would be of enormous help. And on the more concrete topics, I picked up on part of the things that have been said in the panel before, and there is not much to object. It's more about how to do it and make sure that it's actually there on the table, and that we work together in the committees to make it happen. I don't think you would have much opposition from the Envy committee in the parliament, but there might be other committees who would not be as willing to do what's been said about the agriculture sector, as I heard here today. And there might be other sectors who are maybe not as interested in other committees in the parliament who might not have the majority to say that we should put the resource efficiency first in the impact assessment. But from the Envy committee, I would say we have a majority. And I would also say that it's, as the parliament as a whole, after the last election, there is a more progressive parliament, and we really do more, and we make sure that we get better results. So of course these ideas and these proposals will be better fulfilled in this parliament than the last one. I really believe so. I think on the green tax reforms that I also really took part of now during the discussion also from Mats. I think this is a very crucial thing, and also on the to make sure that we have greener funding, like I said, the Rescue EU, the budget. And that is, of course, once again, not to say there's someone else, but in Envy, we are not responsible, but we need to work with Econ, we need to work with budget and make sure, and also the industry committee, and make sure that we do this together. This transition cannot be only targets, it cannot only be regulations, and it also needs to be driven from economy. And that is a very important push for this transition. I stopped there.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you.
I think that was very helpful, Ms. Güteland, as a first reaction. I mean, you highlighted the need to think about the overall ambition and to substantiate that, especially with sound scientific and methodological advice. How do we keep track of the actual progress we are making? And we're actually referring to the need for more guidance on greenhouse gas accounting methodologies when it comes to incorporating circular economy into the overall decarbonization strategy. And I guess we are very much aligned with the need to make sure that circular economy doesn't become a kind of silo policy, which is detached from the broader economic discussions in the recovery, but also be beyond. How do we make sure that our measures don't sit into an economic system which basically benefits the existing linear system? Let me now complement this with the perspective from Ms. Pietikainen. I see you're with us. I hope you can hear us, and hopefully we can see you. Good. You have led the Parliament's work on the first EU Circular Economy Action Plan. You were also shadow rapporteur for the second one. So from your very deep insight perspective, what elements of the Think 2030 paper and the discussion you heard so far on low carbon circular economy industry for Europe, which are the most relevant from your perspective where we should focus the discussion on? Sirpa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And of course, thank you very much for Think 2030 for producing this material and points for discussion. I think that it focuses in very relevant points to start with. And I just would like to underline what we heard from my colleague Jutta already. It is sort of a spreading the environmental and circularity, and of course, climate as one of them principles in all financial mechanism, both public and private. And the public is even more important. We know the state aids, we know the public procurement, we know the semester process that is coming up front of us. So this is very good. The common agricultural policy as well, and that is the hard to tackle. And it's very good and important that you pick the renovation, because construction and renovation is the biggest part if you just sort of look at scale of the impact on on resource consumption and emissions. And that is, even though it seems to be hard to do, it's actually one of the low-hanging fruits there. And I hope that you could continue that work and sort of a more detailed separating what is the requirements for new construction. And that is, of course, the modularity and all that, what you know very well. Then what do you do with the old waste you can't reuse, because that is sort of the inherited problems. And then the third, that is the biggest, is the renovation. So just a lot of congratulations and compliments. Then a couple of future challenges that I would like to pick on your table, and I think it would be important to discuss about them and to make few further studies. I know you probably don't have, at least I don't have any sort of ready-made answers. But before that, the first point is the harmonized metering, that is the indicators and life cycle analysis based on research and science. And I think that up to the boredom, we should be putting it in all of the papers, all of the legislation, all of the reports, and the harmonization included. And that, as you know very well, concerns very much the common agricultural policy and industrial policy and so forth. If you have different kind of a calculation methodologies, and that especially goes to LCA, the life cycle analysis, you do not get effective measures and you do not get the right picture. And there's a lot what needs to happen in Commission on this side. And I understand that there's in one hand, a lot of support and understanding and a lot of resistance, depending with whom you talk. Then two specific points that I hope you would concentrate yourselves also beside this, and it is interlinked as a part of the circular economy. One is the broader product policy concept, product and material policy content. And what that really means, the designing out of the waste, and what it really means, how you put there the limits, what is the minimum durability for different sectors, so that you can prolong the lifetime of the goods, because that is on the crux, that is on the essence, and that needs to be sort of prolonged globally also. And so the global perspective in this sense is, of course, very important. But then two challenges that we discussed very much also during the circular economy report. One is this molecule or chemical recycling. And nowadays it can mean whatever, basically, that you incinerate the plastics and you call it molecule recycling, or you do it in very low efficiency rates, so you get to reuse, let's say, 20% and you incinerate the rest, or you create fossil fuel gasolines out of it, and then actually you are just a part of the problem and the loop. And then we know that there are really interesting molecule recycling possibilities and developments going on. What really sort of breaks the materials back to the molecules and rebuilds the material, and how to measure that, how to define that in legislation and Commission's programs is crucial, because there I see this kind of a place of a danger that we had with the bioenergy, that you could go terribly wrong if you are not very careful. The second point there, and this I do not know enough to give really sort of a very good content, but that is the carbon cycle. We would need to sort of define and see how you can close the loop of carbon and CO2 cycle in those industries where you use carbon or CO2 in the production. And now, of course, you get it out of the air, or you get it out of the other sources. And on the other hand, you try to restrict the output on the atmosphere. And how could you close that sort of a carbon loop? And this is a bit of a bigger question that I hope that you and the Commission and everybody could make a lot of more effort, so that actually, yes, if you take the carbon that is and CO2 that is placed in many, many products and processes, how you can ensure that you capture it later on and you reuse, and do not call it renewable carbon, because then it gets mixed up with the green energy and green carbon, whatever that is. And this is the whole bio mess that is a mess of its own. And you can get open the door for sort of different kind of a not so sustainable solutions on based on fossil fuels and hydrogen economy and all that what we know. So it could be called closed loop or reused carbon. So this sort of a carbon cycle is one of the challenges. Then two very short points to conclude. Industrial strategy, it really should be there in, and this is something we would need to work out in with the Commission. Now it is yet not even close, this kind of a closed loop circular economy. Second, and this is the digitalization, and we called in the report to have a separate circular sustainable digital economy report. It has a lot of possibilities, as we know, like you had the good example about the mobility as a service. And then when you create lease and service economies, of course, you use platforms. But then on the other hand, this is one of the biggest sources of problems of obsolescence of the goods and processes, the huge energy consumption and all that. And you would need to, in advance, figure out what to do on these major, difficult, nasty challenges of digitalization, not to just wake up later on and say, now, wow, this is wonderful thing that solves all of our circularity and material problems, and then end up seeing that actually this is the fastest growing challenge as it is, both in material side and non-recyclability, short-termism, and then on the energy consumption. A lot of others, but I'm aware a bit over the time, so I will close my mouth now and turn my ears on. Happy to be here talking with you.
Always happy to listen to you, Sirpa. I think your interventions always seem to generate a whole new agenda. So we can start a whole new series of Think 2030 papers with the topics that you just posed to us as challenges. But I think very valuable is that you pointed us to the issue, how do we address trade-offs between these agendas? You took the energy or biomass discussion as an example, but in the chat others came up too, and I would like to take that a bit for the final round of comments. Just to clarify, we receive lots of comments on the paper as such. Why did we exactly took the scope of these sectors, but also why did we only limit ourselves on the outlining the synergies between circular economy and climate change, while there are other relevant planetary boundaries? That's what Igor Struve said. So we actually need to expand our thinking to eventually be able to achieve our objectives, but also to address the trade-offs that Sirpa just indicated. It's just in terms of how much can you reflect, how much can you analyze? We haven't even succeeded to draft a fully fledged decarbonization strategy that integrates circular economy and other decarbonization strategies. So it's really only a discussion starter. And I thank you both for the Commission and our two members of the European Parliament for these helpful comments on this. For the final round, there is a specific example for another trade-off. So we talked about mobility and focused on services. So, and then what could be the policy opportunity? And there was the idea, okay, but if we are incentivizing repairs of older polluting vehicles, does that not slow down the energy transition to electric vehicles? Is a comment from Nuno Briticunya. Take it only as one of probably many examples where we in the paper outlined synergies, and there may be also trade-offs to be discussed. And I only take that as an example that if it's mainly up to member states currently to draft both their recovery plans, but also their integrated energy and climate strategies. What can the EU provide them in terms of support to address trade-offs like this? Because most of the implementation will be happening also at national level. And any thoughts from the panel on this tricky question would be appreciated. I start, so to give the others a bit of chance to think about it, I start with Mats, and I see Carmen also wants to come in.
So I think, as mentioned, that it would be useful to have a kind of toolbox for member states when they now revise their national energy and climate plans in 2 years' time, building on good examples, the Netherlands, Germany's progressive program, but also, for example, South Korea, that is a very interesting now climate plan. But just to add also the role of finance ministries, who are very crucial, as the MEPs highlighted. I'm sure it's possible to convince finance ministries, but there is a need to do much more on that area now when they will be so important on the recovery plans too.
Cool. That was short and precise. Thank you. Carmen, I continue with you and then I go in the order of speakers so that nobody is surprised.
Sure. Interesting challenge and very good point from Igor. The timing of these measures is obviously important, and you highlighted a really important point. I guess where we were coming from in the paper is, the electrification of transport has in certain circles been seen as a silver bullet. And as Sirpa was mentioning earlier, well, actually, is it a silver bullet? If you replace the existing fleet of vehicles with electric ones, are we actually creating more problems by basically increasing our dependence on virgin materials? And do we want to look into that matter a little more? So that's another trade-off that I wanted to kind of highlight, that indeed, it's important to electrify transport, but how we go about it is also equally as important, and making sure we use to the maximum the existing fleet of vehicles can present some opportunities to offset emissions.
I would like to continue with Antti Valle, if you're still with us and haven't listened in to the other reactions. Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you. So answering to your question, how to help the member states with their policy action in this field. So you already mentioned the national energy and climate plans, but I would say that even more important are now the national recovery and resilience plans, because these additional funding provides an unprecedented opportunity to really push these climate and sustainability agenda. As you know, 37% of these resources has to be directed in these targets, and this has provided the Commission, while we can screen the national draft plans and invites the member states to discuss about them. So we are able to, let's say, suggest to them to look into certain directions. And I think this brings the whole discussion to a much more concrete level than the NECP plans, which of course are very important, but then again they are feet off the ground, and now we are discussing on much more tangible action. Thanks.
Perfect. That's a very concrete hint. Jutta Gutteland, please.
There is always a bit of a problem when you enter the discussion or the answer after every the other ones who really said very wise things. I would absolutely have said that it is important that we are helping the member states in every aspect, of course, but the role of finance and the Minister of Finance, I believe, have a very important role here. And I'm not sure that everyone have that they are so crucial in this aspect. I'm not sure that everyone has that in their mind, not at least after COVID and the Rescue EU I believe that we can't rebuild this building and then have to renovate it a couple of years later, as many are telling. It would be awful waste of money, and it would mean that we actually subsidy fossil fuel economy for several more years, because we are so desperate to save Europe after this pandemic. Maybe we will rebuild our dependence on fossil fuels once more, and use that for a couple of years, and then be desperate when more people realize what we see here today, that this is not sustainable, and then it will be needed to rebuild and change once more. So we really need to make everyone aware that when we rescue EU now, we also need to make this as a very green project. It needs to be the sustainability in focus here. So if I should have one message in where I think the member states needs to be aware, it would be there.
Perfect. Sirpa, any final reflections from your side? I know it's always 1 hour is not enough and we're running a few minutes over, but we are still with the majority of our participants. So any last words from you, please? Okay. Let's see if she still connects. Otherwise, I thank you to all our speakers today. Great questions from the audience. As usual, we don't manage to squeeze in as many as we would like, but I think our speakers have touched upon many relevant aspects. It was a pleasure to be with you all this morning. The next Think 2030 breakfast briefing will take place on the 30th of March. And we haven't planned that you all end up on the recovery plans. But actually, the next paper that we want to highlight is from the Eldersgate group, and it's about delivering a sustainable, durable, and inclusive recovery for Europe. You will find the link in the chat box. And with that, I say have a good day and hope to see you around on another Zoom call anytime soon. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.